Hey guys, tonight we begin with a whisper, just a quiet invitation to step outside the noise of the day. You're not here to be fixed or to chase anything. You're here to slow down, to float gently in the space between thoughts, and maybe, just maybe, to witness what remains when everything else is let go. Outside, perhaps it's raining lightly. Or maybe the night is still, the air wrapped around you like a familiar blanket. You lie there with your thoughts drifting in and out like waves, and somewhere not far from this moment is a memory you've stopped trying to explain. One that doesn't shout anymore. It just rests, a dull glow under the surface. You will not be able to control the world, but you can control yourself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, let me know in the comments. Where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are sitting in your living room, barefoot, knees pulled to your chest. The light is low, maybe from a candle or maybe from the street lamp outside, filtered through curtains. Your tea is half warm. A book sits unopened in your lap. And it's here in this quiet that sorrow enters, not dramatically, not in thunder or tears, but like fog entering a valley. Slowly, gently, without needing permission. This is the kind of sorrow that doesn't come from a single loss, but from the accumulation of tiny endings. The kind you carry when you don't know exactly what's missing, only that something is. You feel a distance inside you and the temptation is to run from it, distract yourself, scroll, work, clean, call someone, do anything to not sit still. But tonight you don't move. You don't flinch. You let it settle around you. You even breathe with it. There's a strange thing that happens when you allow discomfort instead of resisting it. It loses its urgency. Suffering, as the Stoics remind us, is often born not from pain itself, but from our resistance to pain. Epictetus would say, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." The woman you will become in this story, the woman who outwaited her sorrow, was not born with any more courage than you have right now. She simply learned how to sit still long enough to see sorrow as a teacher instead of a thief. It begins like this. You wake up one morning not long ago and the world feels muted, not broken, just quiet. You put on your clothes with slow hands. You forget to eat. You check your messages and nothing urgent appears. The hours stretch out, elastic and strange. At first you think you're just tired, or maybe sick. You tell yourself it will pass, but it doesn't pass. And unlike a storm which blusters and blows, this grief stays low. It lingers under your skin, not loud but constant, like a low hum in an empty room. This is not depression, not exactly. It's not despair. It's sorrow, a quiet, faithful kind that asks for nothing but your attention. And so you give it, you go for a walk, the air is damp, you move slowly. A child runs past you on a scooter, their laugh ringing like wind chimes in the distance. You feel a pang of something, longing, envy, you can't tell. You just let it rise and fall. There's a tree at the corner. You've passed it 1,000 times. Today, for the first time, you see how gnarled its roots are, how many storms it must have weathered. You reach out and touch the bark. Rough, solid. Indifferent, the Stoics believed in learning from nature, from how the sea accepts every wave without judgment, from how the sun does not hurry or pause, from how trees bend and do not break. You return home. You lie down. Not to escape, but to observe. Something deep inside you wants to fix this, wants to name it, label it, solve it. But what if instead you just stay? What if sorrow doesn't need to be healed, but held? You remember reading once that Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, used to write quietly at night, even while battles waged and his body ached with illness. He wrote not to publish, not to be praised, but to remind himself of what he could control and what he could not. He could not stop people from betraying him. He could not prevent illness or loss, but he could choose how to meet those things, calmly, even kindly. The woman you are becoming now begins with that choice, not to run from what you feel, but to watch it, not to conquer sorrow, but to sit beside it, like a quiet guest, like an old friend. It may sound passive, even weak. But consider, what is stronger than someone who does not flinch in the presence of pain? What takes more strength than patience, more courage than presence? Some philosophers still debate whether true inner peace is ever really possible, or whether we simply build moments of calm inside the chaos. Either way, you're building one now. With your breath, with your stillness. And slowly the fog in your chest begins to shift, not lifting entirely but becoming lighter, less tight. There's no epiphany, no big revelation. Only this: you stayed, you didn't run. And that matters more than you think. The silence that follows loss is not empty. It is crowded with memories, questions, echoes. You sit in it now, like a guest in a room you didn't ask to enter. The air is thick with things unsaid. People have tried to comfort you, some with good intentions, some with empty platitudes. Time heals. Everything happens for a reason. You've smiled and nodded, but inside, those words don't touch what you're carrying. So tonight, you don't reach for answers. You reach for awareness. You sit with the space that sorrow has carved out, and for the first time, you listen. Not to advice, not to noise, but to the quiet behind your own breath. There's a scene that keeps returning to you. Maybe it's the last conversation you had with someone who's gone, or a moment when life changed, and you didn't realize it until much later. It plays like a soft reel in your head, not demanding attention, just hovering. You let it play. The Stoics teach us that emotions are natural. They are not enemies but signals. What matters is how we meet them. Do we wrestle them down, or do we sit beside them with composure? You've started choosing the latter. At first, this composure felt false, like pretending. But now it's beginning to feel like something sturdier. Not numbness, not denial. Just the beginning of stillness. And stillness, as Marcus Aurelius wrote, is the seat of strength. It's early evening now. You're at home, wrapped in a sweater you haven't worn in years. It smells like a time you can't quite remember. The windows are shut. There's a plant by the sill, half alive, half forgotten. You water it without much thought. And in that act, in the motion of your hand, the sound of the water trickling into dry soil, you feel something shift. The plant is still here. And so are you. Loss doesn't always come like a thunderclap. Sometimes it's a slow erosion, a fading, a quiet slipping away. The voice on the other end of the phone that used to call every Sunday. The chair at the table that no longer gets pulled out. The plans that quietly dissolve without fanfare. And when that kind of loss settles in, the world keeps spinning. People keep laughing. Trains keep running. But inside, you feel like time has paused. Not frozen, but thickened, like honey. You go out for a walk. It's almost dark. The air is cool. You pass by a cafe where you used to sit with someone who is no longer part of your life. Whether by death or distance or slow drift, they are gone now, and the table inside that window still stands. The cups are still warm, but you are outside and they are not here. You stop walking. You look at your reflection in the glass. And for a moment you see not the person you were when you first sat at that table, but the person you've become since. Older, yes. Maybe heavier in spirit, but also quieter, more observant. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." You're starting to understand that. This is not a trial you wanted, but it is a trial you are within. And unlike the frantic grief of the beginning, this new phase of loss, the silence that follows, is teaching you how to dwell inside your own skin without trying to escape it. You stop in front of a bookstore. The lights inside are golden. You walk in. You run your fingers over the spines of books, and for a moment the world becomes simple again. Paper, ink, stories, knowledge, this too is Stoic, to find beauty in ordinary things. To let small rituals be anchors when your heart feels adrift. You buy nothing. You leave the store and continue walking. And as you round a corner, you hear laughter, real, full, alive. It spills from a group of teenagers clustered near a bench. Their joy is loud and careless. You feel something tighten inside. You're not angry, just distant from it. And yet, you let the sound wash over you. You don't shrink from it. You don't resent it. You let it remind you of what is still possible. Some philosophers argue that grief has no destination, that it is not something we move through, but something that becomes a part of our architecture. Others disagree. They say we grow beyond it, around it. That sorrow becomes a seed of empathy, of clarity, of peace. You don't have to decide who is right. You just keep walking. And when you get home, the silence is still there, but it no longer frightens you. It sits with you like an old dog, familiar, watching, not needing anything but your company. You light a candle. You open your window just a crack. And in the coolness that enters the room, you find yourself breathing a little deeper. You're learning to be okay with the absence of answers, to trust that not every wound must close in order for you to live well. And this ability to stay present, to stop demanding, to let time take what time needs, is not weakness. It is power, the kind that moves quietly, the kind that waits. You take a train to the sea, not because the sea will heal you. You're not expecting revelations or resolutions, but you remember that old woman who lives there, the one with the gray braid and the tiny porch that smells of salt, the one who lost her husband 40 years ago and never remarried, not out of grief, she once said, but because silence became a good companion. You never really asked her how she managed her pain, but today something in you wants to know. The train rocks gently. Outside the window, the landscape slides by, trees like ink drawings, fields pale with summer dust. You doze a little. Think a little, doze again. And when you arrive, it's mid-afternoon. The sky is wide and open, seagulls drawn like pencil marks across the blue. She greets you like she's been expecting you. No surprise, just a small smile, soft eyes. "I made tea," she says. You sit on her porch, a chipped ceramic cup in your hands and the sea stretching out in front of you like a second sky. For a while, neither of you speaks. It's not awkward, it's something else. A reverence, perhaps. A shared knowing. Finally, she says, you feel like your sorrow should be over by now. You nod and your throat tightens. She nods too, as if to say, I remember that part. I used to count days, she continues, like a prisoner. One more day without him. One more day without answers, and I thought I must be doing it wrong. I must not be grieving right, otherwise it wouldn't still be here. You look at her hands, wrinkled, steady. She's holding her tea with both palms like it's something sacred. But then I realized, she says, I wasn't supposed to get rid of it, just learn to carry it differently. The Stoics believed this too, that we don't remove burdens, we realign them. Epictetus told his students that our suffering often comes not from events themselves, but from our beliefs about them. Loss is inevitable, but feeling punished by loss, that's optional. You stare out at the water. It's not dramatic today. No crashing waves. Just slow rolls like breathing. You ask her, does it ever stop hurting? She smiles, not unkindly. No, she says, but it stops controlling you. There's a pause. Wind in the grass. A gull calling overhead. I started treating my grief like weather, she says. Some days it rains, some days it clears, but I don't yell at the sky anymore. I just dress for it. You both laugh softly. This moment, this porch, this tea, this salt-worn silence is not a cure, but it is clarity, a kind of gentleness that feels stronger than optimism. A quiet agreement between two people who have stopped trying to rush what takes time. You ask her if she remembers the worst part. She thinks, the mornings, she says, the moment just after waking, when I forgot he was gone and then remembered, that little death every day. You feel that too. Not about a person maybe, but about a life you thought you'd have, a version of yourself you thought you'd be. And every morning there's that flicker, that flash of forgetting. And then, impact. She looks at you and says, but those mornings taught me something too, that I could survive remembering. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It wasn't morbid, it was protective. To remind themselves daily of what could be lost, what already had been lost, and yet still breathe, still walk, still pour tea. You sit for a while longer. The sun dips lower, the tide creeps in. Before you leave, she presses something into your hand, a smooth stone, oval and warm from the porch. For your pocket, she says, to remind you that some things are heavy and beautiful at the same time. You squeeze it, not tightly, just enough to know it's real. On the train ride back, the sky goes purple and then black. Lights flicker past in small towns you'll never visit. People get on and off. Life keeps happening quietly, indifferently. And still, you remain, holding the stone, thinking not about how to erase your sorrow, but how to sit beside it more kindly. Some philosophers argue that we glorify stillness too much, that to pause is a luxury, not a discipline. But maybe stillness isn't about stopping. Maybe it's about returning to the moment, to the breath, to the part of you that remains whole even when you feel broken. You arrive home late. You set the stone on your windowsill. You change into something soft. You make tea, her kind of tea, strong, fragrant, honest. And when you lie down, the silence feels different now. Not full of absence, full of space. Room for something to unfold slowly. Room for you to remain a little longer inside yourself without wanting to escape. The pain is still there, but it no longer dictates the terms. You're learning not to be afraid of remembering, because remembering is not weakness. It is your quiet defiance, your still, patient strength. You wake earlier than usual, not startled, just aware. The kind of waking where the light is still dim and the air feels unclaimed. The world hasn't put on its noise yet. There's just the hush of being alive. You sit up slowly, stretch without urgency, and notice your sorrow hasn't left. But it's quieter now. It's not clawing at your chest. It's resting, still there but not so sharp. This is what the Stoics meant when they spoke of training the soul like an athlete trains the body. Not in grand, performative acts, but in small, repeated choices. You make the bed, not because it changes the world, but because it steadies the part of you that can be steadied. And that steadiness is a form of rebellion against chaos. You open the window. The breeze that comes in is neither cold nor warm, it just is. A reminder that the world doesn't shape itself around your moods. The Stoics knew this too. You have power over your mind, not outside events, Marcus Aurelius wrote. Realize this and you will find strength. You don't check your phone. Not yet. Instead, you sit at the edge of your bed, feet flat on the floor, and breathe. Just breathe, and that for this morning is enough. Later, you walk to the park, not to meet anyone, just to walk. There's a tree there you've always liked. It's gnarled and imperfect, growing at a slant. It looks like it should have fallen years ago, but it hasn't. Its roots hold strong. Its branches still catch light. You sit on the bench beside it, and for a long time you don't do anything. A child runs past, laughing. A dog trots by, nose in the grass. Life unfolding. You remember reading once that Epictetus was born a slave, that he walked with a limp for most of his life after being beaten. But he didn't call that suffering. He called it training, not for the body but for the soul. You think about your own limp, not visible but felt. The places in you that bend now where they once stood straight, your patience, your expectations, your sense of certainty. But these bends haven't broken you. They've shaped you. And sometimes shaping hurts. You trace a memory that used to pierce but now merely hums. It's not about grief this time. It's about disappointment. A promise made to you that was never kept. You held onto it like a flame cupped in your hands, trying to protect it from the wind. But it still went out. You let it go now, not in a dramatic way. You don't throw it. You don't bury it. You just let it settle like dust on a shelf, part of your collection of once burning things. The Stoics advised against placing our peace in the hands of others. They warned, if your happiness depends on outcomes, you will always be at the mercy of the world. So today, you choose something else. You walk home with slow steps, not avoiding the cracks in the sidewalk, but noticing them. How they don't break the street, just mark where time has passed. You think of the woman by the sea again, how she didn't teach you how to fix grief. She just modeled how to stand beside it without shrinking. That's what you're doing now. At home, you water your plant again, the one that's half alive. Its leaves are a little greener. Maybe it was never dying. Maybe it was just waiting for a little attention. You touch the soil and think of something you've started to understand. Peace isn't passive. It's something you tend to, like a garden, like a wound. You open a notebook and begin to write, not to document, not to share, just to see what lives beneath the surface of your own thoughts. The first sentence comes slowly. I don't know what healing looks like, but I know what not rushing feels like. You close the notebook. That's enough for today. There's a kind of dignity in choosing what you focus on. You could spend the afternoon doom scrolling, comparing, reaching, or you could make soup, clean a drawer, read something slow and quiet. You choose the drawer. Inside, you find an old letter, one you wrote but never sent. The words are tender and raw, written in the voice of someone who didn't yet know how to wait. You don't cry, but you do sit with it for a while. You don't throw it away. You place it in a different envelope, one that says, "This mattered." But it's not the whole story. Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." You've come to see how true that is. How many hours you've spent bracing for pain that never came. How often you've picked at wounds that were already scabbing just to feel something. But not today. Today you let the wound rest. You take a nap in the afternoon sun, and when you wake there's no guilt. Just the simple pleasure of having allowed yourself rest. Permission is powerful. You realize you don't need to earn it. Some philosophers argue that letting go is just avoidance, but you disagree. You think letting go, when done with awareness, is an act of deep trust, not in fate, not in others, but in your own ability to return to yourself, to wait, to breathe, to soften without collapsing. Evening falls gently. You light another candle. You hum a tune you don't remember learning. You sit at your window with a warm drink and notice the world doesn't feel different, but you do, and that's enough. You remember a time when you thought strength looked like effort. Tight fists, gritted teeth, a face unmoved. But now you're not so sure. Now it feels like strength is something quieter, a willingness to stay open, to feel the full wave of life and not flinch. You sip your morning tea and stare out the window as the sky shifts from gray to gold. Light creeps up the walls like it's trying not to wake anyone. You feel it more than you see it. This, too, is part of your practice. Not rushing to name the feeling, letting it arrive unnamed. The Stoics weren't afraid of feelings. That's a common mistake people make. They weren't robots. They just understood that emotions are visitors, not rulers. That grief, joy, anger, peace, all of it arrives, lingers, leaves. You don't need to chase them or run from them. You only need to greet them as they are. Today, you plan nothing. No schedule. No self-improvement agenda. You let the hours stretch undemanding. You read a few pages of something old and weathered. You pick up a spoon to stir soup. The ordinary things, yes, again. They're not distractions now. They're anchors. Later, you step outside and walk to the river. The river near your place is always moving, even when it looks still. You stand there, watching the surface, and think about Heraclitus, another ancient philosopher, who said you can't step into the same river twice. The water moves on. So do we. Even when we think we're stuck, something in us is shifting, cell by cell, day by day. You let that idea sit with you. You notice a man tossing breadcrumbs to pigeons. His coat is frayed. His hands are gentle. The birds flock toward him without hesitation. There's a kind of peace there that no one would write a poem about, but it moves you anyway. This, you think, is what the Stoics meant when they talked about living according to nature. Not living in forests or growing your own food, though that's fine too, but aligning yourself with the rhythm of life as it is, not as you wish it to be. Accepting what unfolds, moment by moment, without needing it to entertain you, impress you, or validate you. You sit on a bench and just watch. You remember a conversation you once had years ago, maybe, with someone who told you that detachment was dangerous, that it made people cold. But the woman by the sea had said something else. True detachment is full of love. It's just not full of clinging. And maybe that's what you're practicing now, love without possession, presence without demand. You think about someone you used to hold too tightly, not because you loved them too much, but because you feared losing them more than you trusted yourself to remain whole. You don't blame yourself. but you also don't need to go back. You walk a little further down the path, the river whispering beside you. A child rides past on a tiny bike, training wheels rattling. Behind them, a parent jogs to keep up, laughter bouncing in the air. For a flicker, you miss something unnamed. Not a person, just a moment in your life that used to feel like that, full of possibility, of movement, of bright urgency. But you also know now, stillness holds its own radiance. Some philosophers argue that acceptance is too passive, that it surrenders too easily. But what if acceptance isn't giving up? What if it's giving in to the deeper current beneath your expectations? The Stoics believe that nature is not hostile, it simply is. You get sick, you lose things, you are disappointed, you grow old, but none of that is punishment, it's just the way of things. And resisting that doesn't change the current. It only exhausts the swimmer. You smile at the thought. You've been exhausted before. Now you're learning to float. Back at home, you dust off a bowl, you chop vegetables, you hum again. That tune returns, still no name, but it feels ancient. Like it belonged to your ancestors. Like you're not just making soup, you're participating in something older than you. And that gives you comfort. You eat slowly. Not because you have to, but because your body is asking for gentleness and you're finally listening. You chew, you swallow, you breathe. And for the first time in a while, eating feels like a ritual instead of a reflex. Later, before bed, you write again. Just a few lines, just enough to keep the channel open. Today, I didn't force the river, I sat beside it. I didn't demand peace, I allowed it. You close the notebook, you close your eyes, you don't try to sleep. You just lie there aware. The silence isn't empty, it's full. Like the pause between waves, like the inhale before something blooms. And your sorrow, still there, still real, but no longer wild. You've outwaited its sharpest form. And maybe that's what this is all about, not slaying the dragon, but learning to rest beside it without fear. There's a gentleness to the morning that feels earned. You open your eyes not with urgency, but with a soft kind of welcome, like greeting an old friend who visits often. The light outside is filtered, no harshness, no demand. Just enough to see clearly. And sometimes that's all you need. You rise without checking anything. No messages, no news. Instead, you let your feet touch the ground and stay there. You feel the firmness beneath you. A reminder. You are still here, still held, still moving even if it's slow. The Stoics would call this a kind of return, a return to the self that exists beneath the noise, beneath the opinions, beneath the outcomes. And in that return, there is always freedom. You begin to understand, freedom doesn't mean escape, it means presence without chains. You drink water, simple, clean, quiet. There's a sweetness in these rituals now. Not because they change your life dramatically, but because they change how you're in it. Each choice like a pebble dropped into still water. You watch the ripples. You let them carry you into the day. Outside, the world hums along. A distant car horn. A neighbor sweeping their porch. The faint rhythm of construction. The world working, existing. You walk to a cafe today, one you haven't visited in months. The barista remembers your order and you smile. Not because it matters, but because it doesn't. Recognition in this world is rare and quiet. It reminds you that being seen doesn't always need to be grand. As you sip, you think about Musonius Rufus, a Stoic teacher often overshadowed by his students. He taught that philosophy isn't something to speak about. It's something to do. He insisted on simplicity, restraint, and above all, self-respect. And maybe that's what this season of your life is teaching you. Not how to be admired, but how to be aligned. You finish your drink and walk with no destination. A woman passes by, carrying a bouquet of slightly wilted flowers. You wonder if she bought them on sale or if they were a gift meant for someone who didn't open the door. The thought doesn't make you sad. It makes you feel human. For a moment, you think of someone you haven't in weeks. A name, a face, an old ache. You don't push it away. You let the memory pass through like a breeze across skin. It touches, but it doesn't settle. That's the difference now. You no longer build homes for passing weather. A small bench invites you, so you sit. You listen to your breath, to the rustle of leaves, to the life around you that isn't asking for anything. You consider an idea, that we suffer when we think life owes us something. Happiness, clarity, fairness, continuity. But what if it owes you nothing and still gives you everything? The Stoics warned about expectations. They said it's not pain itself that undoes us. It's the belief that pain shouldn't be happening. So you let that belief go gently. You feel the release, like unclenching a hand you didn't realize was tight. You remember the story of Marcus Aurelius, writing his meditations in the midst of war, illness, betrayal. And still, he wrote not of despair, but of discipline, of perspective, of duty. He reminded himself that death was natural, loss was guaranteed, and virtue was always possible. You wonder, what are you writing, not with words, but with the way you move through the world? In the quiet hours of this afternoon, you begin again. You water your half-thriving plant. You sweep the corners of your home that have been left to gather dust, not out of shame, but out of care. You light incense, not for the smell, but for the slow way it curls through the room, teaching you how to rise and disappear at the same time. A package arrives. Inside is something small, a book you ordered weeks ago and forgot about. You run your hand over the cover. You don't read it yet, you just hold it. Another reminder, patience always delivers eventually. Evening comes like a tide. You eat alone but not lonely. The plate is simple but prepared with attention. You chew slowly, without distraction. You let your mind soften. Some philosophers argue that too much attention to the present robs you of drive. That without dreams of the future, you'll become stagnant. But you disagree. You think presence is not the absence of ambition, it's the anchor of it. It's the clarity to see what matters before you chase what glitters. After dinner, you sit by the window again, that familiar place. The sky is now deep indigo, stars just beginning to prick through. You think of the woman by the sea, not her face, but her presence, that calm rootedness she carried. You wonder if she had doubts, too, if she ever woke in the night questioning everything. Probably. But she learned to let those questions come without rushing to answer them. You're learning that, too. You write again, just a few words. I don't need to know where this leads. I only need to know where I am, and where you are is enough. You crawl into bed slowly. You stretch your legs out. You breathe in, long and quiet. No battle to fight tonight. No resolution needed. Just this body, this breath, this pause. The sorrow is still in the room, but it has curled up beside your patience. It doesn't growl anymore. You don't push it away. You let it stay, because some companions aren't meant to be fixed or avoided. They're meant to be understood, witnessed. And when you do that, truly do that, they soften. They wait with you, and together you rest. The next morning begins not with a thought, but with a breath. There's no sudden epiphany. No golden clarity bursting through the curtains. Just you, half awake, half floating, sensing the day has begun again. And that's enough. You rise not with purpose, but with permission. You allow yourself the slowness. In the kitchen, the kettle sings. Not loud, not urgent. It sings like something that's learned the value of pacing. You pour your tea and cradle it with both hands, absorbing the warmth before it fades. Another reminder, everything warm cools eventually. Everything new becomes familiar. And yet, how beautiful that it can still warm you, even just for a while. Outside the window, a dog barks once, then stops. The neighborhood resumes its quiet pulse. You think back to something the Stoics insisted on. Don't tie your peace to the leash of events. If every outside force can yank you into distress, you aren't free, you're owned. You sip. A thought visits, not unpleasant, just unexpected. What if this is the season of undoing? Not collapse, not destruction, but gentle unraveling, like loosening the threads that once held you too tight. Expectations, roles, timelines, the illusion that peace waits just beyond the next milestone. You don't resist the thought, you sit with it. You imagine yourself as a tapestry slowly softening at the edges, not unraveling into nothing, but becoming more flexible, more alive to the air that moves through you. Later, you go for a walk. This time you notice a tree that has started to lean, slightly, subtly, toward the sun. You've passed it a dozen times before, but now it seems to hold a message. Even rooted things shift. Epictetus said that only a fool hopes events will conform to his desires. The wise person conforms their desires to reality. And here, standing in front of this imperfect, leaning tree, you feel that wisdom settle like dust. You don't need life to stand straight. You only need to stand with it. You pass by a bakery. The smell hits you like a memory you never lived. It smells like someone else's childhood, someone else's laughter, but you smile anyway. Because beauty doesn't ask for ownership. It offers itself freely to anyone who's paying attention. You pause on a corner where a group of students laugh over something absurd. You don't know the joke, but their joy is contagious. It makes you think about how often we take our inner world too seriously, as if the only appropriate response to sorrow is solemnity. But the Stoics laughed too. They didn't shun joy. They just didn't cling to it. They let it come, let it go, like any other guest. You remember the first time you laughed after your sorrow began. It surprised you. You almost felt guilty, as if joy were betrayal, but it wasn't. It was a window. A reminder that you are not broken, just opened. Back at home, you write in the margin of a notebook, "Today I leaned toward the sun like the tree. I didn't ask why. I just moved." You close the book. Not because you're done, but because not everything needs to be finished to be whole. You make lunch slowly, slicing each piece with care, not for anyone else, just because you've learned that the pace of your hands changes the flavor of the meal, that your presence is seasoning. In the afternoon, the rain begins. You sit by the window and watch. And it's not dramatic rain, no thunder, no performance. Just quiet drops making their way down the glass like they're in no hurry to reach the ground. You feel something soften in you again. Seneca once wrote that time is like a river. It sweeps away all that comes before it, and nothing is stable, nothing is permanent. And yet, here you are in the river, not drowning. You think about that. That despite the rushing of everything, time, change, loss, you are still here, still seated, still breathing. And the world has not asked more of you than that. Evening falls like a hush. You light a candle, you eat another simple meal. You open that book from the other day, not to devour it, but to drift with it. A page or two, a few words. One line sticks out. Even the stars burn quietly. You think, maybe that's how you're meant to be too. Bright but uninsistent. Warm but without demand. You close the book. You dim the lights. You sit for a while before bed, not meditating, not praying, just sitting, just allowing. And in that quiet, a question arises. Is this what peace feels like? Not the absence of sorrow, but the absence of struggle with sorrow. It isn't a question to answer, just one to hold. You climb into bed with no grand conclusion, no ribbon tied around the day. Just the soft certainty that you've lived it, that you were here, that you listened. Your breath slows, and somewhere in the room grief lies curled like a cat at your feet. Present, but no longer clawing, you whisper not aloud but inwardly. I will not chase stillness, I will become it. And sleep finds you not because you demanded it, but because you stopped needing to. The dream is neither vivid nor clear. It's more of a presence than a story. A faint scent, a flicker of light, the trace of a voice you've never heard and yet recognize. When you wake, you don't chase it. You let it fade. Not all messages need decoding. You lie still for a while, watching how your breath rises and falls without instruction. This, too, is you, the part that doesn't perform, doesn't strive, just exists. And for a while, that's all you do. It's a quiet morning, a little colder than usual. The floor feels cool under your feet. You put on an old sweater, soft from years of wear, and for a moment you feel wrapped in memory. Not of anyone or anything specific, just the feeling of being carried gently by time. You make breakfast with hands that no longer rush. Each movement carries weight, and yet it's not heavy. You've discovered that slowness doesn't mean delay, it means devotion. You remember something Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught. That happiness comes not from abundance, but from alignment. When your actions match your nature, peace follows. You take your tea to the window again. This morning, the street is nearly empty. A woman walks her dog in a yellow raincoat that seems too cheerful for the sky, but it fits her. She waves to someone across the road. The gesture is simple, unnoticed by most, but it anchors you somehow. You write. Small joys are not lesser joys. They are the ones that last. Later, you find yourself organizing your space, not from compulsion but as a quiet kind of stewardship, noticing what no longer belongs, letting go of things that once made sense but now feel like echoes, a shirt, a broken pen, a photo that no longer holds you. Letting go has become easier, not painless, but easier. You pause when you come across a letter. Old ink, careful handwriting. You read it again even though you know every word. And you don't cry this time, you just breathe. That's progress, isn't it? The Stoics never said don't feel. They said don't drown. There's a difference. You step outside for a walk, this time without your phone. It feels odd at first, like something's missing. But then you remember, you are not missing. You are more present than you've been in years. The park is still damp from last night's rain. You walk along the edge of a pond, where ducks drift in and out of frame like thoughts. Children play nearby, their voices unburdened, their movements free. And for a moment you wonder, when did I start filtering joy through conditions? Joy, you realize, doesn't need reasons, only attention. A man sits on a nearby bench sketching the scene. You glance at his page, it's not perfect, not even close, but it's real. His lines are crooked, his perspective is off. But there's something honest in it. And you think maybe that's the goal, not to capture life accurately but intimately. You keep walking. There's a tree here you always pass, tall, strong, split at the base. A scar from lightning, maybe. You run your fingers over the bark. The wound didn't kill it. It only changed its shape. You step back and notice, it's still growing, still reaching for the light, even if not symmetrically. We are all like that tree, aren't we? A little split, a little wounded, but growing still. You return home and write in your notebook. The wound doesn't disqualify you from peace. It prepares you for it. Afternoon becomes a slow current. You read for a while. A passage from a novel catches your eye, not because it's profound, but because it feels true. She didn't want to move on. She just wanted to move with it. That line sits in your chest like a warm stone. You think of how hard you once tried to outrun your feelings, as if healing meant distancing yourself from the thing that hurt. But now you see it differently. Healing, maybe, is the slow companionship with your sorrow, walking alongside it without shame. You make a simple meal again. The knife in your hand is steady. The vegetables are uneven. It doesn't matter. This is not a performance. This is practice. You think about Cleans, who spoke of endurance as a form of spiritual strength, not loud, not showy, just consistent, like a river smoothing the stone. You're beginning to understand that quiet persistence is its own kind of power. As evening descends, you light another candle, not out of need but ritual, a way of marking time gently, a way of honoring the invisible labor of the day, the choosing, the staying, the letting go. You sit by the window again. The sky is violet now, streaked with gold. You recall a friend once told you, the hard part isn't feeling pain, it's not knowing how long it will last. And they were right. But maybe that's where the Stoics offer a gift. They didn't promise an end to suffering. They promised that suffering doesn't have to own you. You lean back. You feel tired, but not in a way that aches. In a way that means something has been lived today, and lived honestly. You think, this is what it means to outweigh sorrow, not by erasing it but by refusing to let it hurry you. You brush your teeth. You fold a blanket. You water the plant. Each act a small declaration, I'm still here. You lie down, there is no music tonight, no storm outside, just the hush that follows a day well met. Sorrow is still near, but it doesn't pull anymore. You let it rest beside you, like a story that's finished its climax and now leans into resolution. You breathe, and in that breath there is no fear, just the knowing. You have walked another day and you did not betray yourself. There's a rhythm now. Not predictable, not mechanical, more like the sea. Gentle tides of presence rising and falling through your days. You still feel sorrow, yes, but not as a weight. More like background music that stopped trying to be the lead. You wake before the alarm. The light outside is blue-gray, soft like the inside of a shell. You don't rush to rise. You breathe in the stillness. No agenda, no self-lecture. Just the simple act of being. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." You're starting to feel that strength, not as a triumph, but as a calm refusal to be pulled. The tea this morning tastes stronger, or maybe your senses are just more awake. You take it with you to the small table near the window. The same view, but nothing is exactly the same, is it? Every day brings a shift. A new leaf, a different bird, the clouds holding their breath in another pattern. You've begun to see how life whispers. Not everything needs to shout to be important. You remember a moment from years ago, someone you loved standing in the kitchen, slicing fruit. Nothing dramatic, nothing epic, but it was a moment soaked in gentleness, and now it returns to you like a warm wind. You don't resist it. Memory no longer feels like a trap. It's a visitor. You can greet it without asking it to stay. You write down in your notebook, the past isn't a place to return. It's a mirror we carry. Later on your walk, you take a different path, not because the old one is wrong, but because something inside you is curious. And curiosity, you've found, is a sign that the soul is healing. The path leads through a grove of trees, where sunlight flickers like candlelight. You hear birds, distant laughter, the creak of an old bicycle chain as someone rides by. None of it asks anything of you. It just happens. There's something comforting in that. Not every sound is a call to action. Not every moment needs your judgment. You sit on a bench you've never used before. The wood is rough. The view is wide. You stay, you think of Musonius Rufus, how he taught that philosophy is not for theory but for life, that the good is found in practice. And this sitting, this noticing, this choosing not to escape, is practice. You remember when your instinct was to solve everything, to process sorrow like a project, to move from grief to growth like a checklist. But now you see the flaw in that logic. Pain is not a math problem. It doesn't need a solution. It needs space. Sometimes just being with the wound is the healing. You feel it now, not sharp, not dull, just present. And you don't look away. You stay with it like a companion who has something to teach. A leaf drifts down in front of you. You watch its slow fall and you think of how nothing in nature hurries, and yet everything arrives. The paradox makes you smile. You walk back home slower than before, not from fatigue, from choice. You stop by a small flower stall. The vendor doesn't push. He just nods at you as you pass, but something in you turns back. You buy one flower, just one. A quiet yellow bloom. You take it home and place it in a glass. It leans slightly to the left. You don't correct it. Perfection has become less important. You realize grief made you fragile, but fragility taught you to be careful with others, with yourself, with the moment. You sit again by the window. The flower catches the fading light. You breathe. There's nothing big today. No breakthrough, no cliffhanger, just another brick in the slow foundation of peace. You write, some days peace looks like this. A quiet walk, a flower in water, and nothing urgent. As the afternoon deepens, you sort through an old box you've avoided for months. Letters, photos, fragments of a life you've been trying not to feel too much. But today you can hold them without collapsing. You read one letter. It ends with, "I hope you're still growing." You whisper, "I am." Evening wraps around your home like a shawl. You light a single lamp. The soft golden hue feels like a hush. You reflect on a question. What if there's no final victory over sorrow? What if the real triumph is your refusal to abandon your softness? That thought sits with you long after dinner. You lie on your back, staring at the ceiling, tracing invisible shapes. There's no anxiety about sleep tonight. No pressure to resolve the day. Only the gentle drifting into rest. The candle flickers once, then stills. And with it your mind stills too. Not into emptiness, but into quiet agreement with the moment. Your last thought before sleep is not a thought at all, but a knowing. I can carry this and still be free. The rain arrives before dawn. You hear it first, soft, rhythmic tapping like a thoughtful knuckle on your windowpane. It's not a storm, not a downpour, just a gentle persuasion to stay in bed a little longer. And so you do. You lie beneath the covers, not from weariness but from gratitude, for warmth, for the quiet, for the kind of weather that asks nothing of you but presence. The Stoics would call this a kind of voluntary acceptance, not inaction but inner alignment. Letting the world be what it is and choosing stillness when stillness is what the world offers. You don't check your phone. You don't scroll or search or compare. You just breathe. A morning like this feels like a gift, and you don't unwrap it with hurry. Later, when you rise, the world outside is still dripping. Branches glisten. Streets are darkened to a kind of shine. There's a smell in the air that takes you back to childhood, wet grass, earth, something faintly metallic and alive. You write, rain doesn't erase the day, it slows it down so you can feel it. There's a certain softness to the rituals now. Washing your face, making breakfast, feeding the plant. These are not chores anymore. They are little devotions, acts of tending, both to the world and to yourself. Seneca once wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And it's true, you feel it. The sorrow you feared would consume you has softened, not because it left but because you stopped rehearsing it. You've begun living beside it instead. You glance outside again. A woman in a red coat crosses the street with an umbrella like a black lily. She doesn't rush, though the light's about to change. There's grace in her stride, and it reminds you, beauty often appears when urgency disappears. You spend the morning writing, not for an audience, not for a goal, just letting the words pour out. Not all of them make sense. Some drift, some contradict. But there's honesty in the ink, and that's enough. You pause on one line you write almost by accident. I thought I had to fix the pain, but I only needed to forgive it. You read it again, something in your chest shifts. You make lunch quietly. Soup, toast, tea. Simple, warm, real. You eat by the window again. Rain still falls, but lighter now, like the last whispers of a long conversation. You recall a moment from Epictetus, how he taught that external things are not in our control, but our reaction is. The rain, the sorrow, the seasons, they are not yours to govern. But your stance, your posture toward them, that is your responsibility. And today, your posture is open. You go for a walk again, raincoat pulled tight, hood up. The streets are quieter than usual, but not empty. You pass a bookstore. You go in. The smell is comforting. Old pages, worn spines, a faint hint of coffee from somewhere unseen. You wander without aim. Not looking for anything in particular, just letting the shelves offer what they will. You pick up a slim book, flip through the pages. One sentence arrests you. Grief is not the absence of love, it is its persistence. You stand there holding it, as if the book itself is a hand on your back. You take it with you. Later at home, you read slowly. A few pages at a time, no need to devour. This is not hunger, it's communion. You pause often to think. You underline things, you let ideas breathe. One paragraph mentions the story of Chrysippus, a Stoic who once watched an athlete lose a race and laughed, not cruelly, but in marvel at how much power we give to what we can't control. The athlete had trained, had hoped, had tried, and still the outcome slipped through his grasp. You think about the outcomes you once clung to, the version of your life you imagined. The timelines, the expectations, the labels, all of it dust now. Not wasted, just released. You write in your notebook, the life I grieved wasn't wrong. It was just not mine to keep. Evening brings a hush, you don't fill it with noise. No background TV, no scrolling. Just the sound of your own body existing. The breath, the blink, the faint ache in your shoulder, the softness in your belly after soup. You run a bath not as indulgence but as ritual. The water is warm. The steam curls upward like invisible prayer. You sink in, let your limbs go quiet. There's no agenda here, no epiphany waiting beneath the surface. Just a moment that asks nothing, and you give it that nothing gladly. You think. Maybe this is what freedom feels like, not the absence of pain, but the absence of resistance. The bath ends. The towel is soft. You dry slowly, not from laziness, but from reverence. Every inch of your body is a witness, to endurance, to memory, to healing. You sit once more by the window, wrapped in a blanket, holding the yellow flower you bought days ago. It's beginning to wilt. One petal has fallen, and yet it's still beautiful. You don't mourn its fading, you honor it. Because now you know beauty doesn't have to last to matter. Presence is enough. And sorrow too can be beautiful when it softens you instead of hardening you, when it opens instead of closes, when it teaches you to feel without needing to be fixed. The candle is lit again. The room glows. You lie down. You're not escaping anything tonight. You're not seeking comfort as an antidote. You're simply being with what is. The rain returns, softer still, and in that gentle rhythm you fall asleep, not because the world is perfect, but because you've stopped demanding that it be. Sleep gives way to morning like mist lifting from a quiet field. You open your eyes not with alarm but with awareness. No lurch, no mental checklist crashing in. Just the light, early and pale, brushing across the floor like a whisper reminding you, you're still here. There's a sensation in your body, not quite comfort, not quite discomfort, more like presence. You stretch gently as if to greet yourself. Hey, you, another day. You don't rush to name the day good or bad. You've learned slowly that each one unfolds without asking for your judgment. That's one of the quieter gifts of Stoicism, learning not to label every moment but to live it. As you pour water into the kettle, you hear the click of the switch. That tiny sound, once lost in the noise of your mind, now feels almost sacred. You smile. There's dignity in ordinary things. Epictetus taught that true freedom is internal, that a person can be imprisoned and still be freer than those who are slaves to desire, to anger, to fear. And you feel that now, not as a theory, but as a truth slowly unfurling inside you. You once craved control. Now you crave clarity. And clarity, it turns out, isn't about knowing the answers. It's about seeing what's in front of you without illusion. You take your tea to the balcony. The sky is pale blue, threaded with silver. A bird lands on the railing, pecks at something invisible, then flies off. You don't try to assign it meaning. You just watch it go. You think back to a conversation you had years ago, maybe at a dinner party or with a friend on a bench. They asked, "Do you think people ever really change?" You didn't have an answer then. But maybe now you do. People don't always change suddenly, but they soften, they unclench. They stop trying to win the war inside themselves and they start listening to the silence beneath the battle. That's what's happening to you. You're not becoming someone new, you're becoming more like yourself. Later in the day, you open a drawer you haven't looked in for months. It's full of things from before. Letters, receipts, an old bracelet. You touch each item gently like an archaeologist uncovering not relics but reminders. These weren't mistakes. They were versions of you, honest ones, trying ones. Sometimes misguided but always sincere. You don't throw them away. You don't need to. Letting go doesn't always mean discarding. Sometimes it means seeing clearly without clinging. You pause and write, "I am the sum of many selves. None of them were wasted." You go out that afternoon. The streets are busier. Life is moving again as it always does. But something's different. Not the world, but your gaze. You watch people, not with judgment, but with a kind of compassion. You see someone yelling into their phone, and for the first time, you don't react with irritation. You think they must be hurting. That thought alone is a kind of freedom. You sit in a cafe, you don't pull out your phone right away. Instead, you listen. Spoons clinking, low conversations. A child laughing over something only children find hilarious. These small sounds wrap around you like threads, weaving you gently back into the fabric of humanity. You remember a passage from a Stoic letter. You can't recall who wrote it now, but the message was something like, "We are each part of the great human body. No limb stands alone." You feel that truth now, not as a sentiment, but as a sensation. You are not as separate as your sorrow once made you feel. Connection doesn't always mean conversation. Sometimes it's just the act of sharing space with others without armor. On your walk home, you pass a mural you've seen a dozen times, but this time you stop. It's a woman painted in swirls of indigo and gold. Her eyes are closed. There's a crack down her face, but instead of breaking her apart, it glows. As if the artist meant to say, "This is where the light gets in." You exhale deeper than you meant to. You whisper almost without sound, "Thank you." Back home, you open the windows. The air is cool. You light incense, not out of habit but with intention. Scent as offering, smoke as prayer. You sit down, close your eyes, and for a moment you do nothing. Not the nothing that hides, the nothing that listens. In that stillness, a memory returns. You, years ago, saying "I'm fine" when you weren't, smiling when you wanted to scream, apologizing for your own needs. You don't judge that old self. You hold them gently in your mind. You say, "I forgive you for not knowing how." And with that, a little more weight lifts. That night, you read again. You find a story of Marcus Aurelius writing to himself by lamplight while camped at the edge of battle. He didn't write for history. He wrote because he, too, needed reminding. Even emperors need to be reminded. Peace isn't something the world gives you. It's something you choose inside again and again. You place the book down, turn off the light. The ceiling is dark above you. The air is quiet. You've stopped asking for your sorrow to end. You've started asking instead, "What is it teaching me now?" And with that simple shift, something inside you, soft and ancient, starts to hum. Not loudly, not all at once, but enough to make you feel you're healing, you're here, you're home. You wake to silence, but it's not empty. It's a silence that holds, a silence that listens back. The kind that wraps around you like an old wool shawl, slightly frayed but warm with memory. The window is slightly open and the air smells of earth. A scent of dew, clay, and the faint perfume of something flowering nearby. You breathe it in slowly as if your lungs, too, want to remember. You lie still a little longer. There's no need to name the day. Let it arrive unnamed. You don't owe the morning a performance. You owe it your attention. When you rise, your steps are measured, ceremonial, not from fatigue but from reverence. You've begun treating your own existence as something worthy of tenderness. The Stoics believe that death walks beside us at all times, not as a threat but as a teacher. Memento mori, you will die. And so this moment matters, not for what it leads to but for what it already is. You write in your journal, "Mortality is not a shadow. It's the frame that gives shape to light." Mid-morning finds you walking a new path through the park. The sky is soft, cloud-draped, almost watercolor in its quiet grace. A couple passes with a dog. You nod, they nod. No words, just a shared agreement. We're all doing our best out here. There's a bench beneath a willow tree. You sit. You close your eyes, not to escape, but to tune in. The wind threads through the leaves above you, and for a moment the world sounds like a lullaby. A memory floats in. Sitting at your grandmother's kitchen table, small hands wrapped around a chipped mug of milk. She was humming a song you never learned the words to. But the feeling, it returns like a gentle tap on the shoulder. You don't push the memory away. You let it sit beside you like an old friend who no longer hurts to remember. There's a paradox here. The Stoics talk about apatheia, a kind of tranquility that comes from not being ruled by emotions. But this isn't numbness. It's clarity. It's feeling everything fully without being carried away by it. And so you feel a breeze, a twinge in your chest. The ache of beauty too vast to hold. You walk again. You find a tiny shop you've never noticed, part bookshop, part florist, part nothing in particular. A place out of time. You step inside. The shop smells of lavender, dust, and old wood. A woman greets you with a nod and then goes back to watering a fern. No sales pitch, no pretense, just the simple act of tending. You pick up a small notebook. The cover is blank, soft linen. Inside, the pages are cream-colored and thick like they're meant to hold truth. You buy it. You don't know why yet, but your hands feel steadier holding it. On the way home, the clouds break slightly. A shaft of light slips through, touches your shoulder. You pause, not because it's rare, but because now you're the kind of person who pauses, and that's no small thing. Later at your table, you open the new notebook. First page, clean. You hesitate, then write in small letters. What if healing isn't the end of sorrow, but learning to live in its company without fear? You sit with that thought. You let it echo. You remember a story about Musonius Rufus, a Roman Stoic who taught that philosophy isn't about theory. It's about how you eat, how you walk, how you care for others. He believed virtue begins in the body, in action, in daily repetition. So you do something simple. You clean your kitchen, not because it's messy, but because order outside helps you feel aligned inside. A kind of moving meditation. Dish by dish, cloth to counter, sweep, rinse, breathe. You don't distract yourself with music. You let the silence accompany you. You hear your own breath, the soft clink of ceramic, the swish of water. This is philosophy too. Not the kind in books, but the kind that grows under your fingernails, that steadies your spine, that whispers, "You are alive, and that is enough." Evening comes with golden light. You open the window again. The scent of the outside world enters like a guest you're glad to see. You sit by the window, knees drawn up, arms around them like an anchor. And you reflect. There were days when grief made the world gray, when you wondered if joy had packed up and moved without leaving a note, when you mistook numbness for peace, and still you stayed. You stayed long enough for the colors to return. They're not vivid yet, not neon, but they're real. And you know now. Subtlety is not lack, quiet is not emptiness. You light a candle, you eat slowly. You read one line from a book and that's enough. You don't need to finish everything to feel full. And just before sleep, you whisper a strange thing aloud to no one in particular. "I'm not trying to be okay anymore. I'm just trying to be honest." And somehow that feels better, more stable, more steady. Like standing on solid ground, even if it's not the ground you expected. You wake before the sun, not from restlessness but from something quieter, curiosity perhaps, or readiness. The kind that stirs you before the world calls your name. The room is dark but not oppressive. You feel its contours now, familiar, safe. You don't turn on the light, you let the shadows speak a little longer. Sitting upright, blanket draped around your shoulders, you feel the hush of the hour. That rare stillness that only belongs to early mornings, when even your thoughts seem to walk softer. And here, in the gentle hush, another Stoic idea greets you like an old friend, the discipline of assent. The idea that not every thought deserves belief, that just because something appears in your mind doesn't mean it must be obeyed. You smile slightly. How often your mind used to gallop, rushing ahead into catastrophes that hadn't happened, telling stories not because they were true but because they were loud. Now you wait, you listen. You ask, is this thought useful? And if it isn't, you let it pass, like a boat on the horizon, seen, acknowledged, not boarded. There's freedom in that. As the sun begins to rise, you make tea. The ritual feels holy now. A way to greet the day without needing to conquer it. You sit by the window. Steam curls from the cup in your hands. You look outside. There's a cat on the rooftop across from you, still poised. It seems to know something you don't. Or maybe it simply doesn't need to know. There's a lesson there. You take a sip. The warmth moves through your chest, loosening something tight. You remember reading about Seneca, how he spent his mornings in deep thought, not about achievement, but about how to live better, how to respond more wisely, how to let go more swiftly. He wrote letters to friends not to teach, but to explore. Because reflection is not a solitary act, it's a way of staying in conversation with the world. You pick up your notebook and write, "Today, I will not rush to label my thoughts. I will let them rise and fall like tides. I will choose which ones to wade into." Midday arrives almost unnoticed. You've slipped into a rhythm, gentle, grounded. There's laundry hanging in the breeze, books stacked by the door, a half-finished bowl of fruit on the table. Nothing grand, but it feels like a life. You take a short walk. The air is warm, humming with quiet industry. People move like rivers, some rushing, some meandering, none of them quite sure of the final destination. You feel it again, that subtle shift. You're not outside of life anymore. You're within it, threaded into its small movements. No longer watching from behind a glass wall of grief. You stop by a market. Buy 3 pears, a bar of soap, a small bunch of thyme. The vendor wraps them in paper and smiles. You nod. Simple exchange, nothing profound, and yet it nourishes you. Later, you call someone you haven't spoken to in a long time. Not to explain, just to say hello. They're surprised but not unkind. The conversation is awkward, then sweet, then something close to tender. You talk about the weather, a dream you had, a book they once recommended that you finally read. There's no need to say, "I'm different now." It shows, and that is enough. When the call ends, you sit back. The afternoon light slants across the floor in golden lines. You trace them with your eyes, and then out of nowhere you feel it, an ache. A tug of sorrow, not sharp, not overwhelming, just a presence, like a shadow stretching its limbs. You breathe, you don't push it away. You whisper, "Okay, you're still here." And something miraculous happens. The ache doesn't grow, it stays still. Because it no longer needs to shout to be heard. You give it room. A chair at the table, a glass of water. You don't try to cheer it up. You just sit beside it, and that too is peace. Evening comes slow and golden. You light a candle, not because you need light, but because you want intention. The way a single flame holds the dark at bay, not by fighting, but by being. You read again, this time about Cleans, the Stoic poet who once compared life to a festival. You didn't choose to be born, he said. You didn't choose the music or the actors. But since you're here, why not observe, appreciate, participate? You think about that, not just accepting life, but attending to it, as if it were a fleeting, sacred thing, because it is. As the night deepens, you close the notebook. The pages are heavier now, filled with pieces of thought that don't need to be perfect. You lie in bed, hands folded over your stomach, the way you did as a child when pretending to sleep. Only this time there's no pretending. You are calm, not because the world has changed, but because you have. Because you've stopped waiting for permission to feel okay, and have started giving yourself that permission, one quiet moment at a time. Morning comes again, and this time you rise slowly, without dread, without urgency. There's no should that drags you from the sheets. Only a soft invitation. Come see what today holds. You stretch not to chase productivity, but to greet your own body, this vessel that has carried you through storm and stillness alike. You notice the ache in your shoulders is less sharp. The dreams from the night linger like mist, and instead of brushing them away, you sit with them. They don't frighten you. You no longer fear the subconscious. It's just another way your soul speaks. And here's something remarkable. For the first time in a while, you feel curious. It's not joy exactly. It's subtler than that. A whisper in your chest, a readiness to look up, to look out, to look within. This is the Stoic practice of prosach, attention. You pour your tea as always, but today you notice the way the steam curls upward like a question mark. You notice how your fingers cradle the cup, how each sip warms not just your throat but some inner room you had closed off. This too is healing, not the fireworks kind, the moss growing back kind. Quiet, relentless, sacred. Outside, the world continues with no knowledge of your soft resurrection. A child on a scooter, a dog barking at nothing, a breeze bending the tops of trees, the chaos of things not needing you. And isn't that a strange kind of relief? For so long, sorrow had tricked you into believing everything needed fixing. But now you see, the world unfolds whether or not you control it. Leaves fall. Conversations end, people change, and yet you remain. Later in the day, you sort through old letters. Some make you laugh, some sting a little. One in particular you hold longer than the others. The handwriting is familiar, the words too kind for how things ended. You let yourself remember, not to reopen the wound, but to understand the scar. You sit with it, then fold it back gently. You don't throw it away. Because grief doesn't mean erasure. You return to the present with a strange sense of gravity, of being rooted. So you do the next right thing. You water your plants. You refill the birdbath outside. You sweep the floor not because it's dirty, but because care is a form of prayer. You remember Epictetus' idea that freedom comes when you learn to want only what already is. Not passivity, not resignation, but alignment. You stop asking, "Why me?" and instead ask, "What now?" You write that down, what now? You don't need an answer. Sometimes the question is enough. Sometimes the courage is in asking gently, without fear. Late afternoon sunlight pours across your desk. It feels like something holy. You don't need incense or chants to make this moment sacred. You just need awareness. You read a passage about the Stoic sage. Not a perfect person, but one who lives in harmony with reason and nature, who understands what's within control and what is not. You laugh softly. You're no sage, but maybe you're learning, and that's something. You walk outside again. Your steps are slower now, not because you're tired, but because you've stopped rushing to arrive. The journey is the destination. The act of walking, of seeing, feeling, breathing is the point. You notice the way gravel crunches under your shoes. You notice a feather caught on a low branch. You notice that you are noticing. This is presence. This is life returning. Back home, you try something new, cooking a dish you've never made before. You don't look up a recipe, you guess. You taste. You spill a bit, you laugh, it's good, not great, but you made it, and that's enough. At the table, you eat slowly. You think of a friend you miss but no longer ache for. You think of a version of yourself that would have criticized this meal, this moment, this smallness. That voice is quieter now. You've made space for something else. And here's the paradox, gently resting beside your plate. By letting go of needing everything to make sense, you begin to understand. You recall a story about Marcus Aurelius. Near the end of his life, surrounded by sickness and betrayal, he still took time each night to write reflections. Not because he was unbothered, but because he knew wisdom must be practiced, not just praised. He wrote to himself, to remember, to stay awake in the face of weariness. And so you do the same. You write, today I let the world be what it is. Today I let myself be part of it. Evening returns. You light a small lamp. You choose silence over screens. Breath over noise. You sit by the window again. The cat is back on the rooftop, curled into itself. A soft sentinel of the sky. You smile. You don't need grand conclusions. You don't need to be fixed. You are not broken. You are becoming. Becoming someone who can wait, who can feel, who can release. And that is the greatest freedom of all, the freedom to live without the armor of avoidance, to show up for your life even when it trembles, especially then. There is a hush to the night, not of emptiness but of completion. You feel it in your breath, deep, slow, unforced. You lie still. The window is slightly cracked and a breeze slips through like a soft exhale from the world itself. You listen not for meaning, not for answers, just for what is. There's peace in that. A peace you didn't demand but allowed. And now, as the story nears its final pages, you find yourself remembering, not the worst days but the quiet ones. The ones you thought would break you with their silence, but that, instead, rebuilt you in whispers. Grief has softened its grip, not because it gave up, but because you stopped fighting it. And as the Stoics taught, not all battles must be won. Some must simply be outwaited. You think again of the woman, yourself, who outwaited her sorrow. She did not conquer it. She did not banish it. She simply sat beside it long enough that it turned, slowly, from tormentor to teacher. This is apatheia, not indifference but clarity. The state of the soul that sees pain and no longer panics. That sees change and no longer clings. That sees endings and no longer begs for escape. You are not untouchable, but you are no longer ruled by what touches you. That is a triumph far greater than mere happiness. You walk in memory back through the moments that led here. The first days filled with resistance. The middle days full of unraveling. The late days where wisdom crept in quietly through the cracks. And now this. A day like any other and yet entirely different. Because you are different. You've dropped the weight of needing to be understood, of needing to explain your sorrow, of needing life to make linear sense. And in that letting go, you've made room for laughter, for slowness, for imperfect mornings and uneven joy, room for questions without answers, room for life in its messy, fleeting, magnificent form. You recall a quote, not word for word, but the essence. That philosophy is not just preparation for death, but for living rightly while we still can. You whisper to the ceiling, to yourself, to no one, I'm here. It's enough. The candle burns lower, the shadows stretch longer, and your thoughts quiet not because they've all been solved, but because they've been met with compassion. In this final stillness, you think again of Marcus Aurelius, sitting by lamplight, writing to himself, reminding his own mind to return to what matters, that nothing external can truly harm the soul, that you have the right to peace simply because you choose it, that every moment is borrowed and sacred for that very reason. You close your eyes. You are not waiting for sorrow to leave anymore. You are waiting for the next dawn with no fear of its arrival. And now we begin the slow wind down. The candlelight dims behind your eyelids. Your breathing follows the soft rhythm of the wind outside. Thoughts drift by like clouds, not gone but no longer heavy. You feel the weight of your body, how it rests now without tension. The bed holds you gently, the way the ocean holds a leaf, not fighting its fragility but floating it with reverence. Your fingers unclench, your jaw softens, even your memories ease their grip, turning from sharp outlines into watercolor impressions. The night stretches out before you, vast and welcoming. You do not chase sleep tonight, you allow it. As you've allowed sorrow, as you've allowed healing. You are not rushing, you are not resisting. You are simply being quietly wholly enough. Let the final thoughts fade now like footprints in sand. Let the stillness wrap around you like a warm shawl. You've walked a long way to arrive here.